Have you ever lingered on an old black and white photograph? One of those impossibly glamorous shots from the 1950s or 60s, and felt a sense of something more than just admiration? A feeling that behind the perfect smile, the flawless couture, and the aristocratic poise, there was a story far more complex and fragile than the camera could ever capture. In the pantheon of mid-century icons, few faces are as hauntingly perfect or as tragically enigmatic as that of Princess Luciana Pignatelli. To the world, she was the epitome of Italian elegance, a raven-haired beauty with eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets and a permanent place on the international best-dressed list. She was a jewel of the jet set, a Roman princess, and one of the prized members of Truman Capote's inner circle of beautiful high society women he famously nicknamed his swans. But Capote, the great chronicler of beauty and its attendant darkness, saw through the polished veneer. With the precision of a surgeon and the cruelty of a gossip, he delivered an assessment of Luciana that has echoed through the decades, a quote that is perhaps the most insightful and devastating epitaph ever written for a socialite. He said, "Luciana has decorated her life as if it were a hotel suite. Everyone is welcome, but no one is allowed to stay." Think about that for a moment, a hotel suite. It's a space of transient luxury, of impeccable but impersonal design. It's a place for visitors, for brief encounters, for appearances. It is, by its very nature, not a home. This single sentence unlocks the heartbreaking paradox of Princess Luciana Pignatelli. It frames her life not as a fairy tale, but as a glittering performance in a gilded cage of her own making. This is the story of that performance, the dazzling ambition, the quiet suffering, and the profound loneliness of the woman who lived in the most beautiful and most empty room in the world. To truly grasp the meteoric rise and poignant story of Luciana, one must first be transported to the world that forged her. Imagine emerging from the gray rubble and rationing of World War II into the sun-drenched Technicolor explosion of 1950s Rome. The city was electric, reborn. It was the era of la dolce vita, the sweet life, a heady cocktail of old-world aristocracy and new-world celebrity. Hollywood had descended upon the Cinecittà film studios, earning Rome the nickname Hollywood on the Tiber. You could see Ava Gardner buying shoes on the Via Condotti or Audrey Hepburn zipping past the Colosseum on a Vespa. This was the birth of a new international society, the jet set, a fluid and glamorous tribe connected not by land or birthright alone, but by private planes, immense wealth, and a shared insatiable appetite for pleasure and publicity. In this dazzling theater, status was a complex currency. Ancient titles from noble European families were still the gold standard, but the flash of new money from American industry and the incandescent glow of movie stardom were gaining fast. It was a world of breathtaking beauty and brutal social hierarchies, where a single photograph in Vogue or Paris Match could solidify a reputation and a whisper at a dinner party could destroy it. Appearance was not just important, it was everything. And it wasn't enough to be beautiful or rich. One had to possess an almost supernatural level of style, taste, and social grace. One had to be, in a word, perfect. It was into this glittering, high-stakes arena that a young woman named Luciana Malgeri was born in 1935. She was not by birth a princess. She was the daughter of a journalist and army officer, part of Rome's comfortable but untitled upper-middle class. From a young age, however, Luciana possessed three invaluable assets: startling beauty, a keen intelligence, and a will of iron. She seemed to understand with a preternatural wisdom the unwritten rules of the world she aspired to join. She saw that beauty was a key, but a title was the door itself. She briefly worked in public relations, a role that gave her a backstage pass to the mechanics of fame and image making. She watched how legends were constructed, how publicity was orchestrated, and how the right alliance, especially the right marriage, was not merely a romantic affair, but the ultimate strategic merger. Luciana wasn't just dreaming of entering this world. She was studying it, planning her conquest with the meticulous focus of a general planning a campaign. She knew what she wanted. She wanted a name that would echo through history, a title that would make her untouchable. She set her sights on the very pinnacle of the European aristocracy. In 1954, Luciana Malgeri, then only 19 years old, achieved what can be described as the pinnacle of her early ambitions through a strategic and transformative marriage. She wed Prince Don Niccolo Pignatelli, Aragona-Cortez, a union that elevated her social standing dramatically. To merely label him a prince would understate the profound historical significance of his lineage. The House of Pignatelli stood as one of Italy's most ancient and prestigious noble families, with roots tracing back centuries. This dynasty had not only produced influential figures, but had also given the world Pope Innocent XII, who served from 1691 to 1700, thereby embedding the family deeply within the fabric of European ecclesiastical and political history. Furthermore, the appended names Aragona-Cortez forged direct connections to the Spanish monarchy, and remarkably to Hernán Cortés, the infamous Spanish conquistador responsible for the fall of the Aztec Empire in the early 16th century. This heritage was far more than a collection of titles. It represented a living legend of conquest, power, and enduring aristocratic influence across continents. This marriage marked Luciana's definitive coronation into the upper echelons of society, effectively erasing her previous identity as an ambitious young woman from a bourgeois Roman background. In a single ceremony, she shed her former self and emerged as Her Serene Highness, Princess Luciana Pignatelli. This shift was not superficial, but a complete metamorphosis. She fully embraced and internalized the role, embodying the ideals of nobility with an authenticity that blurred the lines between her origins and her new reality. Her adoption of the title went beyond mere formality. It involved a profound integration into the customs, expectations, and privileges of aristocracy, allowing her to navigate this world as if she had been born into it. This transformation highlighted her adaptability and determination, turning what could have been a challenging assimilation into a seamless evolution of identity. Following their marriage, Luciana and Niccolo quickly established themselves as the preeminent figures in Rome's vibrant social scene, reigning over the city's nightlife with unchallenged authority. Their residence served as the epicenter of this domain, a magnificent apartment nestled within a historic Roman palazzo that exuded timeless grandeur. This home was no ordinary dwelling. It functioned as a meticulously designed stage filled with heirlooms passed down through generations, including opulent Venetian chandeliers that cast a warm, ethereal glow and an array of priceless artworks that spoke to centuries of cultural patronage. The palazzo's interiors reflected a blend of historical authenticity and refined luxury, creating an environment that amplified their status and drew admirers from across Europe. As a couple, they curated their lives around this setting, turning everyday existence into a spectacle of sophistication that influenced and defined the era's elite circles. Luciana's post-marriage life unfolded as a highly orchestrated routine of glamour and exclusivity, where every moment was infused with purpose and elegance. Her days often revolved around private fittings with renowned designers such as Valentino, who regarded her as a personal muse and tailored creations specifically to her poised figure and discerning taste. She frequently traveled to Paris for sessions with luminaries like Hubert de Givenchy and Cristobal Balenciaga, whose innovative designs she helped popularize through her impeccable wear. Afternoons were dedicated to cultural and social pursuits, including attending gallery openings where she engaged with emerging artists and collectors, or participating in exclusive luncheons that brought together intellectuals, diplomats, and influencers. As evening approached, her schedule intensified into a whirlwind of high-profile events: charity balls, where philanthropy met pageantry, opera premieres at venues like the Teatro dell'Opera di Roma, and intimate dinners that served as discreet forums for global power brokers, politicians, business magnates, and celebrities to network and negotiate. This relentless cycle not only sustained her visibility but also reinforced her role as a central figure in the intersection of fashion, culture, and international affairs. Luciana's allure extended beyond social circles into the realms of fashion photography and editorial influence, where she became a celebrated icon. She was a preferred subject for the period's most acclaimed photographers, including Cecil Beaton, known for his royal portraits, and Richard Avedon, whose dynamic style captured her essence in striking, timeless images. These collaborations produced photographs that immortalized her as a symbol of mid-20th century elegance, often featured in prestigious publications. Equally significant was her relationship with Diana Vreeland, the legendary editor of Vogue, who revered Luciana as the epitome of disciplined high fashion. Vreeland, with her sharp eye for authenticity and innovation, saw in Luciana a rare combination of poise, restraint, and visual perfection that aligned perfectly with the magazine's ethos. These endorsements elevated Luciana's profile internationally, turning her into a benchmark for aspiring socialites and models, while also providing her with platforms to shape trends in couture and style. At the core of Luciana's success was her exceptional command over her public image, a skill she honed to perfection in an era of increasing media scrutiny. She possessed an intuitive grasp of photography and presentation, always positioning herself to convey an aura of serene, almost aloof detachment that captivated audiences without revealing vulnerability. This expression, calm, composed, and slightly distant, became her signature, ensuring she was never photographed in a moment of disarray or imperfection. Her hair, makeup, and attire were invariably flawless, reflecting a disciplined approach to self-presentation. Unlike more flamboyant or eccentric figures of the time, Luciana's elegance was rooted in classical principles: balanced proportions, subtle sophistication, and unwavering control. This style not only shielded her from criticism, but also amplified her mystique, making her an enduring archetype of aristocratic grace in a rapidly modernizing world. During the mid-20th century, specifically in the 1950s and 1960s, Truman Capote, the renowned American author celebrated for his groundbreaking works such as Breakfast at Tiffany's and In Cold Blood, started to deeply engage with the exclusive realms of high society. This era marked a significant shift in Capote's life as he transitioned from being primarily a literary figure to one who actively participated in the opulent social scenes of New York and Europe. It was within these elite environments that Capote began to observe a unique cadre of women who exuded an extraordinary degree of sophistication and composure. These women were not just part of the upper class, they stood out due to their exceptional refinement, which combined elements of fashion, elegance, and interpersonal savvy in a way that elevated them above their peers. Their meticulous attention to personal presentation went far beyond surface-level vanity. It served as a strategic shield that garnered unwavering respect and envy in the competitive arenas of aristocratic gatherings. Capote, with his sharp insight into human behavior and societal dynamics, found himself captivated by these individuals. He saw in them the ultimate exemplars of self-mastery, where each choice in attire, movement, or conversation was a calculated expression of authority, charm, and unassailable allure, reflecting the intricate power structures of their world. By the late 1950s, Capote's initial curiosity about these remarkable women had intensified into a profound fascination that verged on fixation. He no longer viewed them simply as affluent socialites, but as dynamic embodiments of artistry, shaped through their own determination and the stringent demands of their social milieu. To gain closer proximity, Capote strategically inserted himself into their lives, adopting the role of a reliable confidant, an amusing raconteur skilled in delivering clever stories and intellectual commentary, and a discreet chronicler who absorbed every subtle detail of their existence. This positioning granted him unparalleled entry into their private spheres, enabling him to amass a wealth of personal anecdotes, confidences, and observations that would later inform his literary endeavors. The core group he assembled, which he endearingly referred to as the Swans, due to their serene and majestic poise reminiscent of the bird's graceful form, featured prominent personalities like Babe Paley, who personified seamless American elegance and whose innate fashion sense provoked admiration worldwide, and Morella Agnelli, the impeccably cultured spouse of Fiat magnate Gianni Agnelli. These relationships transcended mere friendship. They symbolized the zenith of societal influence, and through them, Capote transformed from a peripheral literary talent into a central figure entrenched in the heart of high society networks, illustrating his adept navigation of class boundaries. As the 1960s progressed, Capote's collection of swans expanded, drawing in more luminaries, and fueling both his personal enjoyment and the public's intrigue through sensationalized media coverage. Capote himself, along with international journalists, took pleasure in crafting exaggerated tales that amplified the mystique surrounding this exclusive circle. A notable example of such fabrication was the alleged rivalry between two European nobles renowned for their distinctive continental sophistication, the French Countess Jacqueline de Ribe and the Italian Princess Luciana Pignatelli. This supposed feud was predominantly a product of media hype, perpetuated by tabloid gossip and society columns that framed their differing aesthetics as a dramatic clash between opposing forces of style and grace. Such portrayals injected an element of operatic drama into Capote's social orbit, converting private connections into fodder for public entertainment. This not only amused the Swans, but also exposed the inherent rivalries within their domain, where mutual appreciation could swiftly devolve into subtle competitions, highlighting the precarious balance of admiration and judgment in elite social interactions. In the 1960s, amid the constructed rivalry narrative, Jacqueline de Ribe distinguished herself as a particularly captivating presence, often likened to an ivory unicorn for her scarce and otherworldly aura. Hailing from French aristocracy, she was celebrated for her bold and performative approach to both fashion and daily life, which infused ordinary occasions with a sense of theatricality. Her aesthetic was defined by audacious, inventive features that elevated routine appearances into profound artistic declarations. Driven by an insatiable inventive spirit, Deribes frequently conceived and crafted her own attire, resulting in extravagant designs that merged historical motifs, such as opulent embroideries evocative of bygone eras, with cutting-edge modernity, like gowns featuring dramatic silhouettes drawn from Renaissance artistry. She transcended conventional attractiveness, positioning herself as the incarnation of creativity, where social functions became platforms for her narrative-driven ensembles. This innovative mindset established her as an inspiration for couturiers, such as Yves Saint Laurent, and secured her regular features in prestigious publications like Vogue. Yet it also unveiled a more intimate facet of her character, a compulsion to challenge and transcend the confining traditions of nobility through bold acts of individuality, thereby asserting her autonomy in a rigidly structured society. In direct opposition to Deribes' whimsical flair during the 1960s, Luciana Pignatelli, an Italian princess wedded into venerable Roman lineage, championed a beauty ethos grounded in stringent self-control rather than fanciful expression. Her acclaim stemmed from an unwavering dedication to flawlessness, approaching beauty as a demanding vocation that required constant rigor instead of leisurely creativity. Pignatelli's charm was methodical and restrained, with every element, from her immaculate complexion to her erect carriage, upheld via exhaustive daily protocols. This contrasted sharply with Deribes' imaginative style, as Pignatelli's method was firmly anchored in practicality, necessitating round-the-clock commitment without concessions. Her discipline was not limited to outward appearances. It mirrored her aristocratic heritage in a post-World War II Europe, where maintaining legacy intertwined with evolving standards of sophistication. In Capote's perspective, she epitomized endurance and command over oneself, serving as a beacon of how traditional nobility adapted to contemporary glamour while preserving an aura of unyielding poise. In 1971, Luciana Pignatelli translated her enduring quest for impeccability into a lasting contribution with the launch of her influential book, The Beautiful People's Beauty Book. This milestone represented a turning point, converting her private practices into accessible knowledge and cementing her reputation as a leading voice on the intricacies of elite aesthetics. The volume rapidly achieved iconic status among style aficionados and those aspiring to ascend social ladders, functioning as an exclusive manual to the concealed arts of high society allure. Examining it from a modern viewpoint unveils a disturbing insight into the intense mental and bodily strains imposed on women of her stature during that time. While it presents itself as a simple anthology of cosmetic advice, a thorough examination discloses it as a declaration on the psychological resilience essential for upholding an illusion of unblemished excellence. Its debut coincided with the evolving societal shifts of the early 1970s, including the rise of feminist movements that questioned conventional beauty paradigms, thereby accentuating Pignatelli's loyalty to enduring noble principles amid progressive changes. Exploring the specifics of the Beautiful People's Beauty Book, readers encounter a regime that verges on monastic severity, promoting radical techniques for bodily cleansing and preservation. Pignatelli endorses extended fasting phases, limiting intake to fluids like herbal infusions or light soups over multiple days to purge toxins and attain a slender, almost transcendent physique. She further suggests atypical rest methods, such as slumbering on a firm wooden surface rather than a soft bed, to foster superior alignment and avert any postural flaws that might compromise one's form. Her fitness prescriptions are outlined with meticulous thoroughness. Intense programs involving bodyweight exercises, flexibility routines akin to yoga, and stamina, building pursuits that demand unwavering daily adherence, irrespective of exhaustion or external factors. These recommendations are positioned not as optional ideas but as non-negotiable commands, reinforcing the book's core motif of self-denial. Such elaboration illuminates the overwhelming burdens on women in her echelon, where attractiveness was inextricably linked to societal endurance, and the slightest oversight could provoke criticism or ostracism. Central to Pignatelli's treatise is a candid and illuminating creed captured in the assertion, "Nobody is born beautiful, one becomes beautiful." Penned in 1971, this maxim shatters the illusion of inherent loveliness, positing that it is cultivated via intentional labor, restraint, and inner strength. For Pignatelli, desirability was not a random endowment but an ethical obligation, a proof of one's resolve and governance over impulses. This perspective infuses her account with significant emotional profundity, depicting beauty as a ceaseless struggle against inherent shortcomings. It echoes wider philosophical undertones in upscale society, the pretense of natural ease concealing arduous toil, and the apprehension that laxity could dismantle one's prestige. Reflecting on this ideology now, it sheds light on the period's gender roles, wherein women were compelled to incarnate ideality as a pathway to agency, albeit at the expense of individual liberty and authenticity. Pignatelli's outlook discloses a poignant reality about her life. The designation of princess was not an effortless inheritance, but a meticulously engineered facade reconstructed each day through extraordinary endeavor. Spanning her lifetime and peaking in the revelations of her 1971 publication, she upheld this image with tireless oversight, permitting no deviations. Every dawn routine, encompassing skincare rituals to clothing choices, contributed to this perpetual rebuilding of an idealized persona. This ongoing enactment required not only corporeal endurance, but also profound psychological fortitude, rendering existence a continuous exercise in self-regulation. The broader consequence is an awareness of fragility. Hidden under the splendor was a dread of deficiency, where one imperfection might undermine societal position. This framework emphasizes the solitary essence of nobility, prioritizing facade over genuineness, and frequently subordinating personal fulfillment to communal acclaim. Extending past corporeal counsel, the book's most contemplative passages tackle the nuances of interpersonal conduct, furnishing a comprehensive strategy for excelling in prestigious assemblies. Pignatelli delineates event protocol with exactitude, strategically delay arrival to convey significance, exit prematurely to preserve enigma, and cultivate a mild detachment to evade perceptions of excessive zeal or vulnerability. These maneuvers transcend polite conventions, serving as calculated instruments for navigating authority hierarchies, guaranteeing sustained appeal and dominance. Derived from her encounters beginning in the 1950s, this counsel demonstrates how engagements in affluent spheres were meticulously orchestrated displays, where precision in timing and conduct could amplify or erode one's sway. Arguably the most evocative and mentally insightful counsel in the book is Pignatelli's edict, "Never look sad. A melancholy face is not a passport to popularity." This principle, which she clearly embodied across her lifespan, distills the psychological burden of her milieu in a setting where openness equated to frailty, exhibiting sorrow risked estrangement and rumor mongering. Conversely, one was obligated to radiate constant optimism and equilibrium, concealing internal conflicts beneath an exterior of serenity. This mandate reveals the deep seclusion inherent in the swans' lives, where authentic sentiments were subdued in favor of relational assets, and delivers a sobering critique on psychological well-being within privileged domains. It illustrates how Pignatelli's rigor permeated the psyche, insisting on not merely physical impeccability, but effective resilience, thereby portraying her existence as an emblem of the concealed sacrifices entailed in pursuing beauty and rank. In Luciana Pignatelli's personal worldview, sadness represented a profound vulnerability, akin to an ugly flaw, marring an otherwise flawless exterior. For much of her adult life, she had meticulously constructed and maintained an image of unassailable perfection, projecting herself as a paragon of elegance and composure. This facade, built over years of careful self-presentation, began to show signs of strain under the weight of accumulating personal secrets and emotional turmoil. The pressures stemmed from deep-seated sorrows that she refused to acknowledge publicly, as doing so would undermine the very foundation of her identity. Her life on the surface appeared idyllic, but beneath it lay unresolved conflicts that gradually eroded her inner resilience. This internal struggle highlighted the immense psychological cost of upholding an ideal that demanded constant vigilance, where any display of weakness could unravel the carefully woven tapestry of her public persona. Behind the opulent doors of the Pignatelli Palazzo, what had once been celebrated as a triumphant fairy tale union between Luciana and Prince Niccolo had devolved into a source of profound private humiliation. The marriage, which symbolized her ascent into aristocratic circles, revealed its flaws as Prince Niccolo's notorious infidelity became increasingly apparent. His affairs were not merely discreet lapses, but rampant indiscretions that circulated as open secrets within the circles of the international elite. This betrayal struck at the core of Luciana's self-worth, as she had invested her entire sense of identity in the illusion of an untouchable, perfect partnership. The public knowledge of his womanizing acted like an insidious toxin, slowly undermining her confidence and dignity, forcing her to confront the disparity between her idealized image and the harsh reality of her domestic life. Over time, these revelations chipped away at her emotional defenses, turning what should have been a sanctuary of love into a battlefield of silent resentments and unspoken accusations. In the rigidly Catholic and aristocratic milieu of 1960s Italy, the concept of divorce was not just frowned upon, but virtually inconceivable, equated with social ostracism and irreversible ruin. For Luciana, ending the marriage would have meant forfeiting her hard-earned status, connections, and respectability within high society. Consequently, she endured the charade for several years, performing her duties as the dutiful wife with unwavering poise. She appeared arm in arm with her husband for paparazzi photographs, flashing, practiced smiles that concealed her inner turmoil. She orchestrated lavish dinner parties and social events, ensuring that every detail reinforced the narrative of marital bliss. This performance required immense emotional labor as she suppressed waves of pain, anger, and disillusionment, channeling these suppressed feelings into areas where she could exert complete control. The societal expectations amplified her isolation, as confiding in others risked further judgment, leaving her to navigate the hypocrisy of a world that valued appearances over authenticity. Faced with the inability to alter her marital circumstances, Luciana redirected her energies toward the one domain she dominated absolutely: her own physical appearance. What began as a disciplined beauty routine evolved into an all-consuming obsession, serving as a psychological armor against the external world's cruelties. She invested extraordinary time and effort into skincare, grooming, and fitness regimens, viewing them as tools to fortify her external perfection amid internal chaos. This fixation was not merely vanity, but a strategic defense mechanism, allowing her to project an aura of invincibility that deflected scrutiny and pity. By perfecting her outward self, she created a barrier that shielded her from the emotional vulnerabilities exposed by her husband's betrayals, transforming personal suffering into a relentless pursuit of aesthetic excellence. This coping strategy, while empowering in the short term, deepened her disconnection from genuine self-expression as it prioritized surface-level control over addressing the root causes of her distress. By 1968, the accumulated strains proved unsustainable, leading to the marriage's dramatic and irreversible breakdown. The divorce proceedings unfolded as an acrimonious and highly publicized spectacle, generating relentless coverage in gossip columns and tabloids across Europe and beyond. Every detail of the separation, from accusations of infidelity to disputes over assets, became fodder for public consumption, amplifying Luciana's humiliation on an international stage. The process exposed the fragility of her carefully curated life as the facade she had maintained for so long shattered under the glare of media attention. This event marked a pivotal turning point, forcing her to confront the consequences of a union that had long ceased to provide emotional or social fulfillment. The bitterness of the proceedings not only drained her resources but also tested her resilience as she grappled with the fallout in a society quick to sensationalize personal failures. In the wake of the divorce, Luciana found herself abruptly expelled from the aristocratic realm she had battled to claim. She was divested of her marital title, her Serene Highness, along with her rights to the Pignatelli Palazzo and the substantial financial stability afforded by the family's wealth. At the age of 33, she emerged as Luciana Pignatelli, a strikingly beautiful and well-known divorcee, yet profoundly unmoored in a society that offered little sympathy for women in her position. This sudden transition left her navigating an uncertain future, stripped of the privileges that had defined her existence, and compelled to redefine her identity beyond the confines of marriage and title. Despite her fame and allure, the loss represented a profound existential shift, highlighting the precariousness of status built on relational foundations. It opened a new chapter where she had to rebuild from the remnants of her former life, drawing on her inner strength to forge a path independent of the illusions that had once sustained her. Following the dissolution of her marriage, Luciana entered a profoundly uncertain phase of her life, marked by a sudden loss of the stability and prestige that had defined her existence. No longer tied to the Pignatelli dynasty, she found herself as a high-profile figure adrift in a world that valued her primarily for her public persona rather than any institutional backing. Her renowned beauty, refined fashion sense, and extensive network of influential contacts remained intact. Yet these personal assets now stood alone, stripped of the aristocratic framework that had once amplified their power. This shift compelled her to embark on a process of self-reinvention, where she had to capitalize on her most enduring commodity, her carefully cultivated image. The transition was not merely professional, but existential. As she navigated the challenges of maintaining relevance in elite circles without the safety net of her former title and family legacy. The emotional weight of this change was immense, forcing her to confront a reality where her celebrity status, once a byproduct of her royal position, became her sole means of survival and identity. This period demanded a level of adaptability that tested her resilience, as she balanced the remnants of her past glamour with the harsh necessities of forging a new path forward. In the years immediately after the divorce, Luciana relocated frequently between the cosmopolitan hubs of London and New York, cities that had previously served as extensions of her glamorous lifestyle, but now represented arenas for survival and opportunity. These moves were driven by a need to reestablish her footing in environments that blended familiarity with potential for reinvention. London offered echoes of European sophistication and access to old-world connections, while New York provided the bustling energy of American commerce and celebrity culture. However, this nomadic existence transformed what had once been playful excursions into a more transactional reality, where social scenes became marketplaces for networking and self-promotion. The constant flux underscored her vulnerability, as she sought to adapt to a life without the anchored privileges of her princess era. This period of adjustment highlighted the practical difficulties she faced, from securing financial independence to rebuilding a social network that could support her ambitions in a post-aristocratic world. It also revealed the subtle erosion of her sense of security, as each relocation brought temporary excitement but no lasting foundation. One of Luciana's most astute decisions during this period was to align herself with the cosmetics giant Revlon as a jewelry designer, a role that emerged in the mid to late 1970s and allowed her to channel her innate elegance into a commercial venture. This position was ideally tailored to her strengths, enabling her to transform her celebrated aesthetic sensibilities, honed through years of aristocratic living, into innovative, marketable products. Her designs, characterized by bold lines and modern flair, resonated with consumers and achieved significant commercial acclaim, boosting Revlon's brand through her association. Beyond design, she evolved into a captivating brand ambassador, featuring prominently in advertising campaigns that projected an aspirational ideal of glamour and refinement. These ads reached vast audiences, positioning her as a symbol of attainable sophistication for everyday women, while simultaneously providing her with financial independence and a renewed sense of purpose in the public eye. This professional pivot not only stabilized her economically, but also reinforced her image as a tastemaker, allowing her to bridge her past elegance with contemporary business acumen. It marked a successful adaptation, where her personal style became a profitable asset rather than just a social ornament. Throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Luciana preserved the outward symbols of her pre-divorce opulence, remaining a staple at the era's most elite social gatherings. She frequented iconic venues such as Studio 54 in New York, known for its hedonistic nightlife and celebrity allure, as well as exclusive private clubs in London that catered to the international jet set. Her presence at these events ensured she stayed visible in the media, often captured in photographs alongside a succession of prominent male companions. Notable among them were the charismatic actor George Hamilton, whose suave demeanor complemented her poise, and the influential Anglo-French billionaire Sir James Goldsmith, whose business acumen and social dominance added layers of intrigue to their association. In these images, she invariably appeared as the epitome of chic elegance, with meticulously curated outfits and an air of unassailable composure. Yet this continuity in her social life masked deeper shifts, as the effortless integration into high society now required deliberate effort to sustain. The analysis of her public appearances reveals a calculated strategy to maintain visibility, but it also exposes the underlying exhaustion of perpetually performing for an audience that once admired her without question. As time progressed, those in Luciana's inner circle began to observe subtle but telling alterations in her demeanor, particularly evident by the early 1980s. The tranquil, self-assured poise that had characterized her during her years as a princess gave way to a more guarded and fragile resilience. What once seemed like innate grace now appeared labored, as if she were consciously performing a role to conceal underlying vulnerabilities. This evolution reflected the cumulative toll of her post-divorce experiences, where the loss of institutional support and the demands of self-reliance had hardened her exterior. Her interactions, while still polished, carried an edge of brittleness, hinting at the emotional armor she had built to navigate a world that demanded perpetual reinvention without offering lasting security. Delving deeper, this change suggests a psychological adaptation to trauma, where the serenity of her past was replaced by a defensive posture forged from repeated disappointments and the pressure to prove her worth independently. By the mid-1980s, Luciana's lifestyle increasingly mirrored Truman Capote's poignant analogy of her living in a perpetual hotel suite, exquisite, yet impersonal and fleeting. She resided in luxurious leased apartments in prime locations across London and New York, each one a showcase of refined taste with high-end furnishings and decor. However, these spaces lacked permanence, symbolizing her reluctance or inability to establish deep roots. Her romantic and social relationships followed a similar pattern. They were passionate and often sensationalized in the press, drawing in lovers, friends, admirers, and opportunists who orbited her fame. Yet these connections were invariably short-lived, with individuals entering and exiting her life in a relentless cycle that left her isolated amid the activity. This transience extended beyond residences and relationships, permeating her overall sense of belonging and contributing to a growing emotional detachment. Analyzing this phase, it becomes clear that her transient lifestyle was both a choice for freedom and a consequence of unresolved pain, creating a cycle where superficial beauty masked profound rootlessness. A lesser-known incident from the 1980s encapsulates Luciana's profound sense of disconnection during this era. During a visit to her meticulously appointed New York apartment, a journalist was struck by an unusual detail amid the opulent surroundings, filled with fine furniture, valuable artworks, and elegant artifacts. The space contained no personal photographs whatsoever. Absent were any images of her children, Fabrizio and Angelica, from her marriage, or even informal snapshots of friends and loved ones. The environment felt like a staged exhibit rather than a lived-in home, prioritizing aesthetic perfection over sentimental warmth. When the journalist delicately questioned this omission, Luciana responded with characteristic composure and candor. "I don't like memories. They are a burden." This statement laid bare the extent of her internal struggle, revealing a deliberate effort to distance herself from the past as a means of self-preservation. Further examination of this anecdote uncovers layers of emotional complexity, where the absence of mementos served as a barrier against vulnerability, allowing her to curate a present untainted by the failures and losses that haunted her. Luciana's aversion to memories stemmed from a reservoir of deep-seated anguish accumulated over years of personal upheaval. Her marriage, which had begun as an idyllic union blending love and nobility, had devolved into a protracted and acrimonious dissolution, leaving scars that she sought to suppress. The forfeiture of her princess title and the associated lifestyle represented not just a loss of status, but a fundamental rupture in her identity, forcing her to confront the sacrifices made by the young Luciana Malgeri, who had aspired to royalty. These regrets manifested as a burden too heavy to revisit, prompting her to curate a present-focused existence that avoided introspection. This coping mechanism, while protective, highlighted the isolation that accompanied her independence, as she grappled with the remnants of a life that had promised fulfillment but delivered solitude. A deeper analysis reveals how this detachment was a form of self-defense, rooted in the fear that acknowledging the past would unravel the fragile equilibrium she'd constructed. Compounding Luciana's challenges was the strained dynamic with her children, who remained in Italy under their father's care following the divorce in the 1970s. Raised within the rigid structures of aristocratic tradition that she had been compelled to abandon, Fabrizio and Angelica experienced an upbringing marked by formality and distance from their mother. Although Luciana sustained contact with them through visits and correspondence, the geographical separation fostered an emotional gap that persisted into adulthood. This physical divide translated into a subtle, ongoing grief, as she mourned the absence of everyday familial bonds, the casual interactions, shared routines, and intimate moments that define parenthood. In pursuing her autonomy and rebuilding her life abroad, she had inadvertently traded the warmth of a family home for a beautifully adorned but ultimately hollow existence, underscoring the profound personal costs of her choices. Exploring this aspect further, it illustrates the bittersweet irony of her liberation. While she gained professional and social agency, the price was a lingering sorrow over the irreplaceable intimacy of family life, which continued to echo through her later years. The discourse surrounding Luciana Pignatelli has historically unfolded in a discrete manner, primarily within the margins of biographical annotations and the refined narratives of high society chronicles. This subtle debate centers on contrasting interpretations of her character. Was she a tragic figure ensnared by misfortune, or a cunning orchestrator of her own destiny? Did she fall prey to the oppressive structures of a male-dominated society, or did she deliberately construct the opulent yet sorrowful path she trod? In reality, Luciana embodied a multifaceted persona, simultaneously encompassing elements of victimhood, agency, tragedy, and strategic manipulation, defying simplistic categorizations. From the outset of her life, Luciana was profoundly shaped and constrained by the societal norms of her era, which positioned women in a subordinate role where their influence and security were inextricably linked to matrimonial alliances. Born into a world where female autonomy was severely limited, she lacked an independent financial foundation or a professional trajectory that could provide self-sufficiency. Her social standing, economic stability, and even her sense of self were entirely contingent upon her association with a prominent husband, in this case, the illustrious Pignatelli lineage. This dependency rendered her vulnerable. Upon the dissolution of her marriage, her privileges were abruptly withdrawn, akin to the revocation of a temporary privilege without recourse. This aspect of her story starkly highlights the inherent instability of women's empowerment in the pre-feminist landscape of the mid-20th century, where societal expectations relegated women to roles defined by marital status rather than individual merit or ambition. The patriarchal system she navigated did not afford her the tools for self-reliance, forcing her to operate within a framework that prioritized alliances over personal independence, ultimately amplifying her susceptibility to loss and displacement. However, portraying Luciana solely as a passive victim overlooks her remarkable agency and unyielding drive, qualities that set her apart as a proactive architect of her circumstances. Far from being a mere bystander in her own narrative, she demonstrated exceptional acumen as a tactician, possessing an acute understanding of the intricate social dynamics and power structures governing elite circles. In her youth, she made a deliberate and calculated choice to leverage her physical allure and vitality in exchange for aristocratic prestige and the lavish lifestyle it entailed. This was no impulsive act, but a meticulously planned endeavor, pursued with unwavering determination and foresight. For more than a decade, this strategic alliance yielded extraordinary dividends, elevating her to the pinnacles of international high society, where she reveled in opulence, influence, and cultural prominence. Her actions underscore that she was not coerced into this existence. Rather, she actively sought it out, recognizing the potential rewards of such a high-risk proposition and navigating it with the precision of a seasoned player in a game of social chess. At the heart of the ongoing controversy lies the essence of Luciana's marital arrangement. Was it rooted in genuine romantic idealism, akin to a cherished fairy tale, or was it fundamentally a pragmatic exchange that soured over time? Her rigorous adherence to personal discipline and her habitual restraint in expressing emotions paint a portrait of someone perpetually enacting a performative role, acutely conscious of the transactional underpinnings of her elevated position. This self-imposed composure suggests a calculated awareness that her status was not innate, but acquired through negotiation, where vulnerability could undermine her standing. The marriage, therefore, appears as a deliberate contract entered into with eyes wide open to its potential pitfalls and benefits. Yet the ambiguity persists. Did fleeting moments of belief in an enduring happily ever after coexist with her pragmatic outlook, or was the entire union viewed through a lens of cold realism from the beginning? This duality fuels the debate as it reveals the tension between aspiration and calculation in a world where personal fulfillment often clashed with societal imperatives. Following the breakdown of her marriage, Luciana faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life from the fragments of her former existence, a process that further illuminated her resilience amid adversity. Stripped of the Pignatelli title and its accompanying privileges, she transitioned into a professional realm, securing a notable position at Revlon, where she achieved considerable success in the beauty industry. However, this career shift was not the organic realization of a deep-seated vocation, but rather an adaptive response to her altered circumstances, a means of survival and reinvention in the wake of personal and social upheaval. In this role, she effectively commodified an idealized image of the glamorous life she had once lived, promoting elegance and sophistication that echoed her past, but no longer fully reflected her reality. This phase underscores the challenges of forging a new identity without the scaffolding of inherited wealth or marital support, highlighting how her post-divorce endeavors were reactive, born out of necessity rather than intrinsic passion, and thus tinged with a sense of poignant adaptation. A revealing contrast emerges when juxtaposing Luciana's trajectory with that of her purported contemporary rival, Countess Jacqueline de Ribe, whose life exemplified a different model of female empowerment within similar aristocratic confines. Like Luciana, Jacqueline was wed to a man of significant influence and hailed from noble origins. However, She benefited from an autonomous family inheritance that provided financial independence, insulating her from total reliance on her spouse. More crucially, Jacqueline harbored an innate creative fervor that defined her beyond matrimonial ties, allowing her to cultivate a self-sustained identity. This inner drive culminated in the establishment of her own thriving fashion enterprise, which represented not a desperate pivot, but a seamless evolution of her authentic interests and talents. In stark opposition, Luciana's professional pursuits lacked this organic foundation, appearing instead as a compelled reinvention from the ruins of her marital downfall. This comparison accentuates the disparities in their respective agencies. Jacqueline's path suggests empowerment through inherent resources and passion, while Luciana's illustrates the constraints of dependency and the arduous process of post-crisis reconstruction. Ultimately, Luciana Pignatelli's allure as a historical figure stems from her intricate nature, which defies reduction to binary labels. She was inextricably molded by a confining societal framework that limited women's options, yet she actively sought to exploit and navigate that very system to advance her ambitions. Simultaneously a casualty of her husband's infidelities and the superficiality of elite social mores, she was also a complicit actor in a realm predicated on appearances and alliances. Her narrative resists facile moral assessments, inviting nuanced reflection on the interplay of structure and individual choice. In embodying these contradictions, victim and strategist, tragic icon, and ambitious operator, Luciana encapsulates the profound ambiguities of women's experiences in a transitional era where personal agency often intersected with systemic barriers in unpredictable ways. The legacy of Luciana Pignatelli is quieter than that of other more famous icons, but in many ways, it is more profound and more relevant to our modern lives. Why does this long-forgotten Italian princess still hold a strange power over us? Because her life was a prophetic blueprint for the age of social media. Decades before the invention of Instagram, Luciana was a master of curating a perfect public image. She understood the power of a single photograph, the importance of controlling the narrative, and the necessity of presenting a flawless, edited version of one's life to the world. Her life was the original filtered feed. We scroll through our own feeds today and see the same principles at work. The perfect vacation photos, the smiling couple portraits, the celebratory career announcements. We meticulously craft a highlight reel of our lives, carefully cropping out the moments of sadness, doubt, and loneliness. In a way, we have all become the curators of our own hotel suites, decorating our digital lives for an audience of visitors, while we live with the unedited reality behind the screen. Luciana's story is a powerful cautionary tale about the spiritual cost of living this way. She achieved the pinnacle of external validation. She was celebrated for her beauty, her style, her title. She was admired, envied, and photographed. But her relentless pursuit of a perfect exterior left little room for a rich interior life. The discipline required to maintain the facade seemed to calcify her ability to form deep, lasting connections. By following her own rule, never look sad, she may have made it impossible for anyone to see her true self, and therefore impossible for anyone to truly love her. Her life forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. What is the purpose of a beautiful life if it is not a happy one? She serves as a haunting reminder that public admiration is not a substitute for private intimacy, and that a life measured in magazine covers can feel profoundly empty when the cameras stop flashing. She embodies the great, tragic contradiction of a life lived for the gaze of others. The more perfect she appeared to the world, the more isolated she seemed to become. The final years of her life were marked by a quiet retreat from the world that had once been her stage. As she aged, the currency of her beauty upon which she had built her entire empire inevitably declined. The party invitations became less frequent. The photographers moved on to younger, newer faces. The jet set that had adored Princess Pignatelli had little use for a middle-aged divorcee. In 1989, at the age of just 54, Luciana Pignatelli died in the American Hospital of Paris. The official cause was a respiratory ailment, but those who knew her story couldn't help but feel she had died of a broken heart, or perhaps of a profound and unshakable loneliness. Her life, which had been a spectacle of public glamour, ended in an almost silent whisper. Looking at a photograph of Luciana Pignatelli today with the knowledge of her full story is a different experience. You see the perfect bone structure, the elegant clothes, the regal poise, but you also see something else in her dark, almond-shaped eyes. You see the steely glint of ambition, but behind it, a flicker of deep vulnerability. You see the discipline, but you can feel the fragility it was designed to protect. You see the princess, but you also see the lonely woman who couldn't bear the burden of her own memories. Truman Capote's devastating line about the hotel suite was not just a witty remark, it was a prophecy and a diagnosis. He saw that Luciana had built a magnificent structure around herself, a life so perfectly appointed that it resembled a museum of glamour. It was a place everyone wanted to visit, to admire, to be seen in. But its perfection was sterile. It lacked the beautiful messiness of a real home, the laughter, the tears, the shared histories, the feeling of belonging. It was a life where everyone was welcome, but no one could stay, least of all, it seems, Luciana herself. Her story is a glittering tragedy, a morality play written in the language of couture and high society. It is a haunting reminder that the most exquisitely decorated life can be the most desolate, and that the ultimate luxury is not a palace or a title, but a place in the world and in the hearts of others that you can truly call home.